In the deserts of Iraq, a team of archaeologists unearths evidence for a 2,500-year-old site of worship.
Was this the base of a incense burner statue or something like that?
Not both.
As they dig deeper, their discoveries reveal insights into one of the greatest monuments in the Bible.
We have both sides of the courtyard for the first time ever. It's an extremely exciting find for us.
The legendary Tower of Babel. Babylon, one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. This metropolis in modern-day Iraq is a vast archaeological site and a place of myth and wonder.
Anyone coming would have been awe-inspired by Babylon's power and its might.
In the book of Genesis, Babylon is the setting for the biblical Tower of Babel, a legendary megastructure so tall it angers God. What lies behind this fantastical story? How much is grounded in the history of this ancient region? Babylon sits in the heart of Mesopotamia, a region in which many of the Bible's most famous stories are set. Now, new archaeological discoveries, buried for thousands of years, shed light on the real events that may have given rise to these legends. This season, international teams of experts dig through centuries of Earth and use cutting-edge technology to piece together these millennia-old mysteries. Their discoveries could help to reveal the world of Babylon. In central Iraq, an ambitious project is underway in the heart of ancient Babylon. Much of the architecture visible here today is modern restoration, built around the original walls. Most of the ancient city remains hidden. Osama Hisham and his Iraqi team are on a mission to rebuild its impressive structures.
There is only a few % of the ancient city of Babylon discovered, only a scratch on the surface.
Osama has worked at Babylon for the past 15 years, and his connection with the site stretches back much further.
I grew up from childhood nearby this site. All of this rich culture affected my way of thinking. I am very proud working here in one of the most important heritage sites in the world.
This season, the team plans to reconstruct a spectacular archway at one of the city's most sacred buildings, the Ninmah Temple. They want to understand how the city was built and what it looked like in its prime.
This building is Ninmah Temple. It's a temple dedicated for Mother Goddess Ninmah. It is one of the most important temples in ancient Babylon. The greatest challenge that this building is facing is the termites and the rainwater, because the building is made from mud bricks and wood beams for the roof.
Termites infest the wooden beams, quickly rendering them unstable. Substantial parts of this temple date back 2,500 years. They require ongoing work to stop them collapsing.
There was a leak in rainwater from the roof, and the water caused a settlement in the foundation, and this, in its turn, caused the collapse in the arch.
Babylon showcased some of the earliest known arches in history. The city rose to prominence in the 2nd millennium BCE, and dominated the region for 1,500 years. At its peak, between the 7th and 6th century BCE, it was a thriving metropolis. Babylon was the capital of a mighty empire and perhaps the largest city of its time. In an era when most settlements were little more than villages, Babylon may have been the first city in the world to reach a population of 200,000 people. It was filled with decorated palaces and holy places of worship, all surrounded by miles of protective city walls. In the 5th century BCE, the Greek writer Herodotus penned stories about this extraordinary place. According to the Bible, there was one megastructure greater than all others: the Tower of Babel. The book of Genesis says that at the dawn of civilization, all humans speak one language. Settling in Mesopotamia, they set out to build a tower that will reach the heavens. Afraid of what else they might achieve, God makes the people speak in many tongues to stop them from working together, and scatters them across the earth. They never complete the tower or the city they planned to build around it. How capable were the Babylonian builders in achieving the engineering feats described in the Bible? First, Osama's team starts by repairing the badly damaged lower walls. They lay the same type of sun-dried mud bricks that ancient builders used 2,500 years ago.
We are building 4 rows of mud bricks each day. Then we will leave the wall and the mortars to be dry so we can build another 4 rows the next day.
Osama thinks the size of the walls hints at the engineering skill of the Babylonian builders. Tall walls need thick foundations. These walls are up to 13 feet wide.
The Babylonians built this thick so they could build towering like monuments.
Osama's specialist team puts the Babylonians' techniques to the test to uncover the expert engineering used to stop these vast and heavy structures from collapsing. These secrets could be the key to constructing a tower of biblical proportions. If such a tower did exist here, what might it have looked like? A clue could lie 250 miles away along the Tigris River at another site called Nimrud. American archaeologist Michael Dante leads the excavation. His work begins at 5 a.m. to beat the blazing hot desert sun, with highs here hitting more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Just looking out across Nimrud, you can see why we all like to dig in Iraq so much. It's really, for me, an archaeological paradise. Walking out every morning to dig at an archaeological site like this, you get this incredible sense of anticipation. You're always finding things. It's never boring.
Nimrud is home to an intriguing structure that could shed light on the tower in the biblical story, a ziggurat.
What you have is the core of the ziggurat.
Ziggurats were towering monuments built in many cities across Mesopotamia. Designed with stepped platforms, some were constructed to allow priests to reach the top. The earliest ziggurats predate the pyramids of ancient Egypt. Until recently, the ziggurat at Nimrud stood at least 100 feet tall.
The ziggurat was flattened by extremists of the so-called Islamic State using an earth mover. They went up to the top of the 34-meter high ziggurat. It was a really impressive structure.
The militant group ISIS captured parts of northern Iraq in 2014 and leveled this historic site as part of its war against non-Islamic heritage. Spectacular winged guardians that once lined the gateways are now reduced to rubble.
When we began our work here, we started in this area where you can see the floor's been damaged by a front loader.
Parts of the city were first excavated in the 1840s, but Michael and the Iraqi team are uncovering more structures beneath the ground.
We're beginning to excavate the sides to get a better understanding of that building as well.
There are large bricks just beneath the surface.
It's a fairly good-sized piece of a brick. The material is clay, very clean clay that is dug in the surrounding plain. This is a baked brick with a fragmentary cuneiform inscription, probably from the reign of Ashurnasirpal II.
The distinctive symbols of King Ashurnasirpal's name are inscribed on numerous bricks emerging from the ground. They are strong evidence that he was the king that built this now ruined structure. Ashurnasirpal ruled the Assyrian Empire in the 9th century BCE, a rival kingdom to the Babylonians. Blocks from this ziggurat reveal the materials used in constructing great towers in this area. Some of these bricks are kiln-baked, even stronger than the sun-dried ones used for the temple in Babylon. It takes real expertise to bake them. If the kiln is too hot, they easily crack.
The brick that I'm holding, while it's broken, is still extremely intact. It's quite hard, very heavy. You could reuse this material now.
On completion, the base of the original ziggurat was more than 160 feet across. It would have been an imposing structure within the city of Nimrud.
Each one of these bricks really is not a cheap thing to produce in antiquity, and if you think about the number of bricks that went into this ziggurat, it's a really impressive project in terms of the industry that's behind it and the technology, the expenditure that the Assyrians were willing to make to build the ziggurat.
What were these ancient ziggurats used for? And how might they have influenced the story of the Tower of Babel? If a ziggurat gave rise to the legend of the Tower of Babel, clues to the story's origin could be found in something else the Babylonians left behind. As well as being excellent builders, they also kept detailed written records in a writing system called cuneiform. Lara Bampfield is one of the few people in the world who can read and write it.
Cuneiform is one of the oldest writing styles in the world. It actually predates Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Cuneiform was developed more than 5,000 years ago. It was carved into stone or written using a wedge-shaped stylus pressed into wet clay. Tablets with this ancient script have been found across Babylon. Some provide valuable details about the city's long-lost monuments. Like this slab, called a stele. The surface is badly damaged. Lara's trained eye picks out a drawing barely visible on the left side.
You can see a 6-stepped ziggurat with a temple on the top. These aren't steps that we as people would climb. These are very high. They're higher than a human, and they're multi-level, and they change height as you get closer to the top.
The ziggurat rises up in a pyramid of 7 stepped levels. Ziggurats with multiple platforms were common across ancient Mesopotamia.
When this was found, it was exceedingly exciting. On the left-hand side, there is a cuneiform inscription, which reads, E temen anki, zi kur ra'at, ka dingir ra. And this translates as E temen anki, the ziggurat of Babylon. And we can actually translate this name, and it reads as the house, the foundation of heaven and earth. What's really interesting is the word ziggurat itself, which means rising building. It is the only contemporary surviving copy of the ziggurat of Babylon.
More cuneiform is inscribed at the bottom of the slab.
This translates to the base of the E temen anki and the base of the E me imin anki. I filled in to make a high terrace. E temen anki and E me imin anki I built. Their structures with bitumen and baked brick throughout. I completed them, making them gleam bright as the sun. What's really nice about this piece is that it explains some of the materials that were used to build the ziggurat. So we can see that it was made of baked brick and bitumen, but it also explains that there might have been something coating these mud bricks that would have given it a gleam in the sun. Now, this could have been kind of a whitewash, so when anyone looked up towards the sky with the sun glaring on it, it would have almost been blinding to the people looking up.
The text describes the Etemenanki ziggurat in remarkable detail. It's an invaluable source that helps reveal the engineering secrets of the ancient ziggurat builders. The Mesopotamians stacked mud bricks to build their ziggurats, using waterproof bitumen as mortar. They laid layers of reeds horizontally at regular intervals to strengthen the walls so they could build high. Early ziggurats stemmed from simple raised platforms. They elevated temples to symbolize closeness to the gods, making them visible for miles around and protecting them from floods. Over time, they evolved into complex, multi-tiered structures. Some reached more than 300 feet tall, using several million mud bricks.
It is really interesting to see how much work was put in by the locals to make such a monumental and tall structure.
In Babylon, whilst Osama restores the Nimbach temple, archaeologist Ahmed Aziz Selman investigates the rest of the more than 3 square mile site.
People like to visit Babylon to see architectures, to see long history, to see what was mentioned about it in the Old Testament and Holy Quran.
Although the stele confirms that Babylon did have a ziggurat, it doesn't reveal its exact location. Ahmed hunts for clues in the landscape. The best way to survey the city for evidence of the fabled tower is from the air.
You have to start from there, from the corner right there.
The drone view from above reveals the heart of the ancient city. Almost half a mile to the south, there are still signs of the city's vast monuments. Many remain buried beneath mounds of earth. One strange feature within the walls of Babylon looks unlike anything else: a huge square ruin.
What we seen here on the monitor is a square shape. What we see right now is only the core of the Babylon Tower.
These foundations are a similar square shape to those found in Nimrud, a sign that this may also be a ziggurat. But these ruins in Babylon are much larger. This is all that's left of the Itamananki ziggurat, depicted on the ancient stele. The Bible says that the Tower of Babel soared all the way to the heavens. Illustrations often depict a spiraling circular design, but there is no description of its shape in the biblical text. The archaeological evidence at Babylon points to a square-based, multi-layered structure. It soared above the city. Could this ziggurat be the real tower that features in the Bible's famous story? Ahmed pieces together the surviving evidence to reveal the height of this original ziggurat.
We have real measurement derived from the tablets and taken from the archaeological studies. So 91.5 meters, that's the dimension of the basement of Babylon Tower. The height was equal to the basement measurement.
The dimensions appear to match those on the Itamananki stele. In its prime, this tower was more than 300 feet tall, and it had a greater footprint than the Empire State Building. Many experts think the writers of the biblical story were inspired by the construction of this gleaming ziggurat. Across the site from the ziggurat mound, Osama's team continues work on the Ninmach Temple. The temple walls are built with similar materials to the towering ziggurat, like mud bricks, reed mats, and mortar.
We are using the reed mats between the mud bricks rows, simulating the ancient way of building. You can see the remaining of the bitumen, but the reed mats decayed through the time.
How did the Babylonians use these simple elements to build such magnificent monuments? Osama and his conservation team are determined to make the Ninmach Temple reconstruction historically accurate. They use first-hand accounts from cuneiform tablets, including the Itamananki stele, to decode the ancient builders' techniques.
The tablets that found in the temple told us about the structure of the temple, which is built mainly from mud bricks. The recipe came for these mud bricks from analysis of the original bricks that's used to build the temple of Ninmach, and we are doing it on the same process.
The height of a structure depends on the strength of its building materials. Too soft, and it will crumble under pressure. Ancient builders had to find a way to make the mud strong and elastic.
It starts from making the mud mixture. This mixture contains water, soil, and straw. Then the mixture will be left for 1 week or two. The tools that we are using are only basic tools to make the mixture and to cut the bricks through a wooden molds.
It takes almost a month to complete each batch of bricks.
These bricks are dried in the heat of the weather. We put the brick in the shade and not under the direct sun, because the heat of the sun will dry them faster and cause them to crack.
The team has made thousands of bricks this way over the past year. These sun-dried mud bricks are the same style originally used to build the Itamananki ziggurat. Osama's team finds that the ingredients used by the ancient Babylonians creates incredibly strong building blocks. Sun-dried bricks formed the core of a ziggurat, while kiln-baked bricks lined the facade to protect it against the extremes of weather.
This is a simple process to produce these mother bricks, but they are bearing a very, very huge weight. Some of the bricks even bear a weight of 1,500 kilograms.
The Babylonian bricks are capable of holding immense pressure. This is a vital feature for building big. If the bricks were weak, the colossal weight of a building like the Tower of Babel could cause the base to crumble. So how tall could mud brick ziggurats reach? To the north, in Nimrud, Michael and the team's excavations are yielding fascinating finds. They unearth rectangular rooms next to the ziggurat mound.
We found this stele against the wall. It's an extremely exciting find for us. These are fairly rare sorts of objects, standing stones or stele, and we're slowly piecing together the entire scene and what this might have meant.
The beautiful carved relief is damaged, but Michael can make out the shapes of two figures.
On the right-hand side of the stele, you see a barefoot figure, and very importantly, they're standing on a pedestal. We can tell from the garment that this is a male. We're reasonably certain that we have a deity here on this podium or platform. They are raised above the profane, the realm of human beings. And this is a kind of a microcosm, the idea behind a ziggurat, where you're elevating up temples or you're elevating up gods.
The figure on the left is standing on a lower level.
They're not as important as the deity, clearly. And this is a very typical scene for Mesopotamia. It's the presentation of an individual before a deity or god.
Michael thinks this wasn't just any individual.
Images like this, where a god is handing symbols of kingship and is in the presence of a human, help to convey this individual's special status. For Mesopotamian rulers, this was a very important scene for legitimizing their power. They were essentially God's agents on earth. Unlike the Egyptians and some other cultures in the ancient Near East, they believed that the king was God's servant on earth.
These clues lead Michael to believe this scene depicts the ruler who built the city and commissioned the ziggurat, King Ashurnasirpal. The king wanted to claim an association with the gods to cement his right to rule. He was so powerful, he was capable of building larger monumental buildings than his predecessors.
It provides some really interesting clues as to how this building was used in antiquity.
This stele reveals the king behind Nimrud's ziggurat. Is there any evidence for a similar mastermind behind the ziggurat in Babylon? In the workshop, Lara takes a closer look at the inscriptions on the Itamananki stele. The Bible simply says that people in southern Mesopotamia constructed the legendary Tower of Babel. Lara thinks this stone reveals who commissioned Babylon's soaring ziggurat.
We can see a figure standing tall. We can tell it's a male due to the beard. He is wearing a long robe and a conical hat. The combination can tell us that this is a royal figure.
More than 100 kings ruled Babylon during the empire's nearly 2,000-year lifespan. So which ruler is depicted alongside the Itamananki ziggurat? Lara writes out a section of the cuneiform text.
From the cuneiform here, we can see several signs. We can see Ag, Nig, Du, and Uru. These can be transliterated as Nabu, Kaduri, User, which can be translated as Nabu, watch over my heir. This is King Nebuchadnezzar II, king of Babylon.
His name appears over and over again in the Bible. Nebuchadnezzar II was the greatest king of the late Babylonian Empire, who conquered thousands of miles of land. Legend has it he built the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon to make his Persian wife feel more at home. But he also had a cruel streak. The Bible claims that when he had a troubling dream and his wise men failed to guess and interpret it, he ordered them all to be executed. He built a golden statue of himself, 90 feet tall, that all Babylonians had to worship. Those who refused got thrown into a fiery furnace. Nebuchadnezzar's largest monument at Babylon was the Etemenanki Ziggurat. The Stele says he repaired and enlarged a smaller structure here to make something even more spectacular.
There are many reasons to why Nebuchadnezzar might have wanted to rebuild the ziggurat. This is an emblem of his power and authority. It took almost his whole reign to rebuild it, so it was definitely a status symbol.
The king's ambition for building seems to mirror the account in the Bible story. Like the biblical builders, Nebuchadnezzar intended to leave his mark. What further purpose did ziggurats serve in Mesopotamia? At the ancient city of Nimrud, Michael and his team worked tirelessly to clear the areas around the ziggurat. The rubble from the demolished tower hides the city monuments that surround it.
We're really hoping that by re-excavating and opening up new areas, we're going to shed light on ancient religious practices. There's a large area that's never been explored before.
Michael and his colleague Brad Hafford excavate the structure next to the walls of the ziggurat. The team digs deeper.
Was this the base of a incense burner statue or something like that?
Both.
Yeah, could be either. There is some preserved wall above the baked brick, so we'll have to watch carefully for that, but it's pretty badly eroded on this east side, I think.
Incense was often burned by worshippers in temples. At Nimrud, they worshipped the patron deity of the city, Ninurta, god of war and agriculture. As the archaeologists remove the crumbling bricks and sand, walls come into view.
We think that that's the main doorway, and if that's the case, then we have both sides of the courtyard for the first time ever.
It takes hard work to move many tons of earth. Finally, the team exposes the walls of a great temple.
What we've found is the front part of the Ninurta temple.
Michael's new discovery paints a vivid picture of life at the Nimrud Ziggurat. Ancient priests used this temple to worship the god Ninurta.
The cult statue would have been against the side of the ziggurat. Most of the activity in the temple took place at this lower level, with the ziggurat towering above the temple in the background.
As well as religious activity taking place at its base, the ziggurat itself had a holy significance. This complex at Nimrud could shed light on the one that would have been found in Babylon. The Etemenanki Ziggurat at Babylon rose high above the temple complex. At the top of the stairs, there sat a temple dedicated to the city's patron deity, Marduk. Only priests were permitted to climb to the top, bringing them closer to the gods. This attempt to reach the heavens may have inspired the story of God's anger in the Bible. Marduk was the god of justice, compassion, healing, and magic. He became the most prestigious god of Mesopotamia. The archaeological evidence shows that Nebuchadnezzar's great ziggurat not only had religious significance, it was also a symbol of power. A worthy inspiration for the Babel legend. But the Bible's account is set at the dawn of human history, long before Nebuchadnezzar was born. Is there a reason for this strange chronology? Writing expert Lara Bampfield decodes another cuneiform tablet with a story from the ancient city of Uruk. Despite being written around 1500 years before the Tower of Babel story, there are some striking similarities.
So the line on this tablet talks about how Enmerkar is trying to build a ziggurat, but there is this confusion of tongues. This line in particular talks about the harmony of tongues and how they want to create one tongue. This line reads, "The whole universe in unison to Enlil in one tongue." Although this is a Sumerian myth, we can see parallels to the biblical scriptures talking about multi-tongues and the confusion of tongues.
The Sumerians were a neighboring civilization to the Babylonians, who also wrote in cuneiform.
The biblical story that talks about multi-tongues was written in about the 6th century, whereas this Sumerian myth was written in the 21st century BCE.
A clue to understanding why this same story appears in different accounts could be the writing system itself. Cuneiform flourished in ancient Babylon.
Babylon would have been a trading hub, a melting pot of different languages and cultures. Cuneiform was first invented to help as an administrative tool to track trade, barley or wheat or animals. During the time of Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon would have been an epicenter of writing.
Archaeologists have found evidence that in Babylonian schools, pupils learned to write by repetitively carving cuneiform lines on clay tablets. Babylonians used this early writing to record laws, send letters, and even record the movements of the stars. Scribes wrote down, copied, and collected myths from Actemia and preserved them for future generations, carved in clay.
Cuneiform became a really useful tool.
The shared writing system of cuneiform may have led to the transmission of ancient Mesopotamian stories through written accounts and copied texts. Myths and legends about languages may be a reflection of this multilingual region. So how might the writers of the Bible have come across the Sumerian tale of Enmerkar and the confusion of tongues? And why was Babylon the setting for their great tower? The Bible's Tower of Babel story is set at the dawn of civilization, long before the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar and his immense ziggurat. But this ruler played a vital role in the lives of the authors of the Old Testament. Lara thinks historical accounts could reveal why.
We've heard of Nebuchadnezzar as a military king, and we have accounts of this both in cuneiform inscriptions, but also from the Bible, where he's actually written as quite ruthless and quite harsh.
In the 6th century BCE, Nebuchadnezzar II and his Babylonian army laid siege to Jerusalem. Jerusalem was set ablaze, its temple and homes reduced to ruins, leaving the city in ashes. The Judeans were forced to leave their homes and taken to Babylon. But even in exile, they protected their culture, inventing a new form of Hebrew alphabet and writing down much of the Hebrew Bible.
The accounts in the Bible were written by people who Nebuchadnezzar oppressed. So it's not a surprise to hear that they portrayed him as this horrible person that came in and obliterated everything in his path.
The Judeans living in exile at Babylon would have seen the Etam-Menanke Ziggurat and heard the stories told there. Some experts surmise that the Judeans wrote the Tower of Babel account in Babylon beneath the shadow of its ziggurat, drawing on this city and its tyrant king to teach a wider moral lesson about the start of humanity.
Whether he was actually as harsh, as ruthless as any other king was when he went on a military campaign is unsure, but the accounts we do have definitely portray him this way.
At the ancient city of Babylon, Osama and the conservation team replaced the last few bricks in a length of the ancient city walls. The tower may be gone, but the mission to rebuild and understand Babylon's monuments goes on.
Conservation of the monuments in Babylon will make them last longer for the next generations to enjoy and learn more about this famous city.
The team's work here reveals that Babylon's monuments really were as impressive as the ancient legends suggest. They may not have matched the biblical proportions, but their sheer size and ambition guaranteed their iconic status in legends like the Tower of Babel.
The kings of Mesopotamia built larger and larger temples and ziggurats over time. They wanted to build the biggest and the best. They wanted to inspire the people that they ruled over, but also to foreigners who visited their cities.
The Tower of Babel story in the book of Genesis is not only a compelling origin myth, it seems to reflect the ingenious engineering of a real towering monument in ancient Babylon, the Etam-Menanke Ziggurat. The story may reveal the ancient world in which it was written, the development of early writing, uniting multiple languages, the legends that were preserved in clay and retold over millennia, and the rulers that left their mark in the lands here.
Babylon itself would have been such an impressive city to all who came to visit it. I don't think we can understand today how large and on a scale of pure power and show the king will have made this city seem to visitors.
This season's discoveries shed light on the world in which this epic Bible story was set.
It's a land of first, the cradle of civilization, the first kings, the first cities, the first writing. It's an incredible wealth of artifacts to excavate in Iraq.
In the center of a crowded capital city, a team of archaeologists digs down into the past.
Okay, I get Felix.
Out of the earth appears a face hidden for 2,000 years.
Be very careful.
An incredible treasure
Oh, wow, wow.
from a lost biblical kingdom.
It's intact.
The stories in the Bible are famous across the world. They tell of great battles between good and evil, earth-shaking catastrophes, and heroic characters. One of the most famous names is King Solomon. In the Old Testament, Solomon was king of ancient Israel, a mighty ruler in a golden age, wise and wealthy beyond any other king. In Jerusalem, he built a mighty temple to house the Ten Commandments given to Moses. The Ark of the Covenant held the central rules of the early Jewish nation, marking a promise between God and his people. The period in which Solomon would have lived is known as the Biblical Iron Age. It lasted from 1200 to just after 600 BCE and was a time of mystery and great change. Excavation of Jerusalem's Temple Mount is difficult and controversial, and archaeological evidence for Solomon's temple and even the man himself are lacking.
When most people think about this region, they think about the Kingdom of Solomon. But there's a lot of other things going on. Multiple kingdoms, multiple kings, gathered on all sides of the Dead Sea and the Jordan River.
To the east of Solomon's Israel lay three other Iron Age kingdoms that appear in the Bible: Ammon, Moab, and Edom.
They're all experiencing their own growth, their own development. We've only scratched the surface about what's going on.
This season, archaeologists are leading new investigations into these kingdoms. What can they tell us about the golden age of the legendary biblical ruler?
It's absolutely exciting. I mean, this is something you dream of.
Using cutting-edge technology, they reveal the lost world of King Solomon. In the modern city of Amman, dawn breaks. As archaeologist Katharina Schmidt and her team arrive at their dig site in the very center of Jordan's capital.
I love Jordan. I mean, look around you. It's probably my most favorite place, particularly now, starting the first season here in Jordan.
This year, the team is embarking on a groundbreaking new project, hoping to reveal a lost Iron Age kingdom. 3,000 years ago, the region around this city belonged to the ancient biblical kingdom of Ammon, one of Israel's neighbors, and is reflected in Amman's name.
Waking up with the city every morning, it's just absolutely fabulous. And being able to work at that site is a dream, really.
4 million people crowd the steep slopes of this city, but at its center is a nearly untouched hill known as the Amman Citadel.
We are right in the busy capital of Jordan, and we are lucky because the Citadel of Amman has not been overbuilt over the years.
Exploratory digs from the 1960s found evidence of a mysterious ancient structure that seemed to be from the Iron Age, ensuring the land here remained undeveloped. Now, Katharina has the chance to continue that investigation and discover precisely what it is. This time with all the high-tech tools of the 21st century archaeologist.
We can use what they have uncovered, so we don't need to dig down for, 4 years to reach the layers we are particularly interested in. We can immediately start where we want to start and apply all these methods.
One of the most useful modern tools is drone photogrammetry.
So I think we can start here on the top of the site. Elevation would be great.
Imaging specialist Felix Volter wants to create a digital map of the whole area of the Citadel. This will help him find any structures that were missed first time around.
The drone obviously gives us bird's-eye view on the site, so we're able to see the site from a completely different perspective in much more distance, which will allow us to see certain structures in a 3D model.
Felix photographs the entire eastern end of the Citadel.
Yay, perfect landing.
and heads to the site office to stitch the high-resolution images together.
We see here this is our excavation from the bird's-eye view, and we can zoom out now, and we see actually all this eastern part of the citadel. I can see that there's also some other structures, possible Iron Age city wall structures. And if I zoom in, I see it actually rows of stone put together.
A wall surrounding the hill suggests the structure within was important. Katerina walks down into the building to try to discover its purpose.
What is very, very useful is to get structures in situ, having a wall and a floor together in order to really define a building.
The sheer scale and layout of this building indicates to Katerina that this is not an ordinary dwelling.
Right in the south, in the far back, we have a set of rooms. We have a huge courtyard that comes right after that set of rooms. And we have a set of rooms here, right next to me, where sort of a storage area must have been. This is already really large, but we haven't even reached the boundaries of that entire building yet.
The thick walls and vast spaces, and the discovery of a stone toilet seat in one room, are evidence this was a royal building. Multiple stories high and covered with fine plaster, it would have sprawled across the hilltop, with a huge wall around its perimeter. Could this be a palace from the age of Solomon? Archaeologist Zaidan Kafafi is co-director of the project. He's been excavating sites across Jordan for 40 years.
Archaeology, for me, started as a study, then as a career, then as a life.
Zaidan's expertise lies in pottery, a crucial tool for dating this ancient megastructure. He examines the sherds found at this site for their size, material, and appearance.
Each period of time, it has its own pottery, which bears the characteristics for that period.
He believes the design on this pottery identifies the century when this palace was occupied.
When I look at this, I see the decoration, which we call it typical Ammonite period decoration. This means this could be 8th, 7th century BC.
This evidence puts the palace's occupation close to the age of Solomon.
We believe that we are actually dealing here with the residence, the palace of the Ammonite king.
Katerina and the team could find precious clues here to what life was like in this neighboring kingdom. And it's not the only site that could shed light on this period. 30 miles south of Amman is the ancient site of Tel Diban. Archaeologist Piers Paul Kriesman is here to explore what other peoples and settlements dotted this landscape in the Age of Solomon.
Beginning of the Iron Age, sometime around 1000 BC, is a bit of a messy period. There's no one giant society that is kind of guiding and overpowering all the others. It gives an opportunity for different entities to come into existence in their own way. And here we have a great example of one of those, the Kingdom of Moab.
Diban is associated with Dibon, a place in Moab referred to in the Bible. The layers of history preserved here could provide an insight into the power of ancient Moab and potentially its neighbor, Solomon's Israel.
For thousands of years, people have been occupying this specific place. And when no one knows what's at the bottom yet, we just haven't gotten there.
The accumulation of building material and rubbish, repeated over the centuries, creates a man-made mound known as a tell. At the base of Tel Diban, Piers Paul assesses the construction method of the ruins to work out what period they're from.
What we can see here is at least the Iron Age, so something like 900 or 800 BC. This is a retaining wall from the Iron Age wall above it. This helps make sure that all of the stuff stays tucked up and safe. It'd take you the better part of an hour to walk all the way around it. So Tel Dabon is a big tell.
The physical scale of the Moabite defenses suggests this city was not only large, but important.
If all of that was enclosed in a huge wall, this wall was 2-3 meters high and 2-3 meters thick. It's a lot of effort to build that to protect the city. That means there's things worth protecting inside of it.
Piers Paul heads up onto the Tell to search for what lies at the heart of this biblical Iron Age city. At the Amman citadel, Katerina believes this palace was occupied by the Ammonite king during the biblical Iron Age, the Age of Solomon. Now, the team needs to find evidence of what life was like then. Gradually, more pieces of the palace emerge.
That's part of a floor. Quite a, thick layer of floor.
The team is piecing together a puzzle with the smallest of clues, such as pottery sherds and fragments of plaster.
So Etham is digging down towards the edge of the wall, and then we can also remove the stones on top of it to have a look.
We can move it.
Come on. No way.
But as Katerina monitors the work,
no way. You know what that is?
excavator Haitham Al-Adwan uncovers a mysterious piece of carved stone inside this wall. It looks different to the other blocks around it.
That's really nice. Be very careful.
Katerina thinks she recognizes what this could be.
It's absolutely, I mean, it's, I don't know, I can't describe it. It's basically the top part of a double-faced female head. You're looking at the top bit of the head. So it's basically the hairline, the midline of the hair, and the side locks. So it's exactly that part.
This Iron Age carved stone head has been reused in a later century as a mere building block. If the team can get it out in one piece, it will be a monumental discovery, offering invaluable insight into the people of the biblical Iron Age kingdoms.
Iron Age sculpture, stone sculpture are really rare, and so this is something you dream of before you start an excavation.
Mabruk!
Yeah, mabruk.
Local team member Amani Al-Dabuki excavates the soil around the head, one brushstroke at a time.
I just need to clean it to see the edges so I will not harm it. That's why I'm doing it so carefully. We need to remove all the soil and stones from around it, then we will pull it out.
Once enough soil is removed, the team gathers round to reveal the head.
No, mal schauen, mal schauen. Oh, wow, wow. Oh, it's intact. It's perfectly preserved. Look at her. She's staring at you.
The pristine expression of an Ammonite stone sculpture peers up at the team.
This lady sees sunlight for the first time of like 2,700 years.
There is an incredible level of detail on the delicately carved stone features.
See the eye, the left eye, and you see there's still the remains of the white inlay the eye was made of. So this is interesting that there's obviously something left over.
This is the largest and best preserved object the team has found all season. Traces of paint or inlays could even remain on the sculpture.
We can take them to the lab and see if they were colorful or not. But I I guess they were, but scientifically we need to test that.
One of the team fetches a super-sized sample box. And when the head is fully clear,
Okay, be careful.
they carefully lift the lady from her millennia-long slumber.
Take your time. Okay. Well done. So let's take it home.
Back at the site office, and out of the blinding sunlight, Katerina can take a closer look.
There are some small traces of red. Tiny.
The first task is to make a 3D computer model of the head.
Amani is our specialist. She scanned a lot of Iron Age statues in the museum on the Amman Citadel. And we are lucky that she's part of our team. And she's also scanning the new lady.
Amani needs to do this as soon as possible to ensure the object is still precisely as it was when she dug it up.
Unfortunately, when you take things out of the ground, the decay starts. And by scanning it, you really also document the object in the best possible state.
The bright lamps and powerful camera can achieve incredible definition and perfectly capture the richness of the sculpture. Katerina's next step is to take this to a national laboratory and use the latest scanning technology to gather all the clues this sculpture holds. The Bible tells of King Solomon's incredible wealth, riches of gold and silver. Clues to what might have inspired these stories could lie south of ancient Israel. The valley of Wadi Fanan lies in the Iron Age kingdom of Edom.
That's the site. You see the rocky mountain there.
Archaeologist Mohammed Najjar is on the hunt for the source of this biblical kingdom's wealth. He's worked across the Middle East for 45 years and shows no sign of slowing down.
We don't stop. I mean, you cannot retire from archaeology. Whenever chance is happening, you just go there and doing things.
Mohammed is following a trail of clues, visible in satellite imagery. Dark patches scattered through the valleys. Beside one of these dark patches, he discovers a bizarre-looking well that runs deep into the ground.
We have this circular hole, and there are 3 holes inside, and this is man-made. You can see this bigger hole is provided with steps where people can move. So the hole here indicates that we are dealing with a mine.
These mine shafts originally descended for more than 120 feet underground. And Mohammed believes they're the source of the nearby heaps of black stone and dust.
The dark heaps around are coming from deeper level. So this is waste. These heaps here, tailings, they are very helpful when you are doing the investigation here, because you can see these tailings from even a satellite picture or from aerial picture. And these are always indicators that there should be a mine there.
Ancient mines were a source of valuable metals. Rulers not only used these metals for currency, but also to decorate their palaces and show off their wealth. Mohammed heads down the hill to investigate which metal these miners were extracting. At a laboratory just outside Amman, Katerina wants to find more clues from the Ammonite head sculpture. She's brought it to a facility that can detect chemical elements without the need for destructive testing.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
We have one.
Really?
It's one of the double-faced heads.
Is it fresh one?
It's fresh from the field.
Finding ancient traces of paint could help Katerina understand how elaborate the Ammonite palace was and how wealthy its king.
Measuring the eye and the white around the eye would be, of course, fantastic. And possibly we see in the light inside some of the red traces, and we can try that.
The Sesame Laboratory is able to detect the presence of different metals used as bases for different colors of paint. To do this, they use a circular particle accelerator, known as a synchrotron. Magnets arranged in a 140-foot wide loop speed up subatomic particles to almost the speed of light. Then they're fired down this barrel, straight at the object being tested.
I wondered if we should put her upside down, pour her, to give her a bit more stability.
Senior scientist Masoud Harfouch helps to place the stone head in the crosshairs.
Usually they have really small samples that would fit into the beamline without any problem, but moving the lady in between the beamline is a bit more complicated.
Masoud and Katerina carefully tie it into place.
It's a bit odd because she was just buried 2,500 years and now she's in this high technological lab. What we really want to know is the colors. We really want to know how she would stare at us. Do we have different colors of the pupil, of the surrounding part of the eye?
Masoud places the fluorescence detector into position. The way in which the photons bounce off the stone head will identify specific elements. A camera trained on the head shows them precisely where the particle beam will scan. The beamline fires up, and photons traveling at about 600 million miles per hour interact with the ancient head, but leave its stone surface completely intact. Readings begin to come through. Each peak in the graph identifies a particular element.
So all calcium, the iron, that's copper, this is zinc.
So that's copper.
This is copper, yes.
The stone itself is made up of many elements, so Katerina and Masoud expect to see a number of these metals. But crucially, this test reveals different concentrations on different parts of the face.
This bit has higher copper elevations or levels than
the body.
Whitish surrounding.
These could be the first telltale signs of what colors decorated the grand palaces and temples of these ancient biblical kingdoms.
From the analysis, we have different elements and most likely also have different colors or color tones.
The machine identifies metals including lead, zinc, and copper that could be used to make black, white, and red paint. This statue was likely richly painted, and the resources put into its decoration suggest it was commissioned by a wealthy ruler. Where did the metals to make these colors come from? In the arid valleys of southern Jordan, Muhammad searches for the metals that were a source of wealth for the ancient biblical kingdom of Edom. In a dried-up riverbed, where water has worn a channel right through an Iron Age mine, he hits pay dirt.
Okay, we have here one of the galleries. Probably the shaft was somewhere here and is gone by erosion. This gallery goes for about 25 meters deep. One shaft probably has more than one gallery, so galleries were spreading out in different directions.
The target of all this digging still glimmers from the exposed rock face.
The green color here everywhere indicates that we are dealing with copper ores here, so this is copper.
The Iron Age takes its name from the innovation in iron production, a far more plentiful metal. But copper was still a precious material, important for coins and jewelry. The Edomites turned the dirty business of copper mining into a highly profitable industry. They became expert smelters, whose furnaces reached 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit to melt the ore and extract the pure metal. Each settlement produced tons of copper every year and shipped it all over the ancient world. The metal was in high demand in the age of Solomon. The Bible describes his fabled temple as having columns covered in pure copper. Muhammad walks the ruins of the Edomite town of Finan and finds that signs of smelting cover the landscape.
If we look around us, we can see heaps of slags everywhere. It means that production here was at industrial scale. It was a big industry.
Slag is melted rock and ore that has run out of the furnace and solidified. Thousands of years later, this waste material is vital evidence of when in the Iron Age this mining town was active. Pieces of charcoal trapped inside the slag can be used for carbon dating.
This particular site was dated to about 11th to 10th century BC.
This places a thriving Edomite copper industry at the same time as Solomon and the tales of his elaborate temple. All that remains of the mining boom here is the melted waste of the copper furnaces. Does evidence of the grand projects they fed still exist elsewhere in the Three Kingdoms? At Tel Deban, in the ancient kingdom of Moab, Piers Paul continues his exploration of the mound to find out how grand this city was and what made it worth defending. The team clears a structure at the center of the Tel. It lies deep down in one of the city's earliest periods of occupation.
If you look at the walls that look a bit whiter than all the others, those are pretty old. Those are probably the early part of the Iron Age.
Excavators have only exposed part of the structure so far, but it's still enough for Piers Paul to get a sense of how impressive this would have been.
I can walk most of this room, this chamber, in about 10 seconds. To us today, that wouldn't feel like a massive structure. But 3,000 years ago, our priorities are different, our technologies are different. Having a room and a structure like this doesn't serve your basic functions of life. This is something more.
The construction of this building at the heart of the city would have been a huge investment of energy and resources for an Iron Age people.
All of these things put together, the location, the size, the scale, and the age of it, tell us this belonged to the most important person or served the most important function of this time and place. Usually that's palaces, temples, administrative structures.
In the case of Tel Deban, archaeologists have been able to attach a name to this structure.
This particular building in the past has been dubbed Mesha's Palace. Now, that has to do with the find, not here, but here in Deban, just over on the other hill.
200 feet from the walls of the palace, a Bedouin tribe uncovered a huge slab of polished basalt rock, bearing the longest Moabite inscription ever found. It refers to Mesha, a leader of the Moabites, who the Bible describes as mortal enemies of the Israelites. The inscription is the single biggest source of text to come direct from that age and is full of detail of Mesha's deeds.
It reads, "To add to Dibon, I built the walls of its parks, the walls of the citadel. I built its gates, its towers, a royal palace. I made the retaining walls of the water reservoir within." There are other lines that talk about how he's vanquishing his enemies, how he's taking the spoils of war from them and bringing them back here.
It's clear to Piers Paul that this list of great feats and the language used in the inscription are intended as nothing less than the boasts of a king.
This is part of Mesha's greatest hits. He says, I'm King Mesha, the king of Moab, of this place, and these are the things that I have been able to do with and for my people.
This stele was written only a century after Solomon might have lived. The wording indicates that Moab was more than a spread-out clan or tribe. It was a fully fledged nation. There is another key feature mentioned throughout: a Moabite god.
In all these feats, he is attributing the success and the previous inability to do so to the primary deity, the foremost god. The one above them all is Chemosh.
Throughout human history, the worship of many gods has been the norm. Pierce Paul thinks this begins to change in the age of Solomon.
During this time, there's something different happening, culturally, spiritually, socially, around this part of the world. And you start to see societies leaning more heavily on one God. So it wouldn't be a stretch to think that these practices that we see in this one very detailed record might be repeated in these other societies.
How different were these nations in their beliefs? As work continues to reveal more of the Moabite palace, Pierce Paul searches for further links between these kingdoms and the biblical age of Solomon. At the dig site in Amman, the team continues to search for clues to how the Ammonites lived. In the spot where they found the carved head, lightning strikes twice.
Guess what? We found a second one.
Katerina's team has uncovered another stone head. This one is similar in appearance, but crucially, not identical.
The beauty of these heads is that they are all individual.
Katerina believes it shows they weren't representing one specific person or god.
These heads next to each other adoring the person who would enter the palace. That's how you have to imagine these heads. These female heads were really the good spirit of the building. They are supernatural beings in between humans and gods. They symbolize beauty and surplus of everything, good spirit, and it's beautiful. You feel it.
These heads were intricately carved and richly decorated, with inlaid eyebrows, eyes, and necklace beads. Dozens of these heads, each one unique and brightly painted, would have slotted between two stone dowels and formed a striking decoration for a royal palace. These sculptures were for decoration, not worship. However, there is evidence of an Ammonite deity elsewhere on the citadel.
If you want to look for the gods, or at least the major god, you would have to go to that side of the citadel.
900 feet from the dig site stand the columns of a Roman temple. Beneath the Roman ruins, archaeologists discovered a much earlier monumental Iron Age structure.
This is in fact the highest place on the Amman citadel. So you either expect there to be a temple or a palatial structure. Since the palatial structure was actually here, the only other building that could sit there is the major temple of the kingdom of Ammon, which would be the temple for the major deity Milcom.
The Ammonites built large stone statues to the god Milcom and worshipped him much like other kingdoms did with their state deities. But biblical texts accuse them of sacrificing children to Milcom, burning them in fires, accompanied by drum beats to drown out the screams. Why does the Old Testament depict the Ammonite religion in such a diabolical light? In ancient Moab, at Tel Deban, Pierce Paul examines the rest of the mound to learn more about the real relationship between the different kingdoms of the Bible. A thick stone wall surrounds a bowl-shaped depression on the side of this tell.
There's an interesting feature on the inside of this wall. It's a thick plaster. And if this is down here, with the bowl here, this could be a kind of waterproofing to help retain anything coming off the tell. This is almost certainly a reservoir for that Iron Age settlement on the top.
This enormous reservoir would have been a huge infrastructure project for an Iron Age city.
On the Mesha inscription, the king brags about being able to develop cisterns and prepare his people and save more water.
The pool itself could also reflect a reference from the Bible.
Another settlement here in Jordan is ancient Heshbon, and so the pools of Heshbon are mentioned in historic scriptures and texts, and this is the kind of thing that could inspire that.
The biblical poem Song of Songs, supposedly written by Solomon, compares his lover's eyes to Moab's famous pools of Heshbon. Solomon took wives from all the kingdoms around. He had a child with an Ammonite princess and another with the Queen of Sheba. He even built temples in Jerusalem for his wives to worship their gods, and angered his own God as a result. These accounts paint a picture of a cosmopolitan king of Israel, an attitude also seen in daily life in this region.
People are bumping into each other, you're trading with each other, there's intermarrying, there's all kinds of social engagements. So much of it is incidental and unrecorded.
The kingdoms next door to ancient Israel provide clues to what Solomon's own realm might have been like. Just as the Mesha Stele describes the Moabites' reward for honoring their God, the Bible describes Israelites suffering for Solomon insulting Yahweh, the God of Israel.
With every story that people write about where they came from and how they came into existence, they talk about the trials and tribulations that they have encountered, and they paint anyone who's not them as the other. These other groups, these other societies, the Moabites, the Edomites, and the Ammonites, are the other in the biblical histories. But just because those documents reflect them as other doesn't mean that's how they were.
When the Bible texts were written, many centuries after Solomon, they berate him for his outward-looking approach. Why do these later texts look so harshly on Israel's neighbors?
Instead of taking the much later biblical literature and scriptures as a writ of how these things happened, the responsible thing to do is to take them as a piece of evidence, try and evaluate them against what we can prove through the physical record.
What separated these biblical kingdoms at the end of the Age of Solomon? How did their paths diverge? At the Amman Citadel, the dig team continues its investigations. Katerina examines how this period of flourishing independent kingdoms came to an end.
The excavation here is so exciting because we hope on the long run that we can say a little bit more about what happens here in Ammon. We hope to find different layers where we can say a little bit more about this transition. If there is a continuity, if there's a pause, if there's a destruction, question mark.
Discoveries from around the citadel could also hold clues to what came next. Among the ancient riches of the Archaeological Museum of Jordan, Museum Director Taher Gonmin tracks down a very small object that could tell a much bigger story.
This is the seal we found in Ammonite Kingdom in the southern slope in Amman Citadel across in Roman theater.
Stamp seals are common ancient objects. They were used to make a unique impression in wax as a way to seal official documents. This particular stamp seal has a curious design.
The seal we can see is very pure Assyrian influence.
The Assyrians were a mighty empire that dominated the region to the north. This seal could indicate their presence here in Ammon.
This inscription is Ammonite, the Amk language.
This is an Ammonite stamp seal, but in the Assyrian style. A symbol in miniature of the period when Ammon had become part of the Assyrian Empire. Faced with the brute force of the Assyrians, the Ammonites chose to submit rather than face annihilation. The Assyrian overlords allowed local rulers to stay in power, provided they remained loyal and paid their dues. In the ancient kingdom of Israel, Solomon's heirs refused to bow to Assyria, and its cities were raided and destroyed. Many Israelites were deported and scattered, marking the end of a golden age.
The Iron Age was a period. This entire region was split up into these independent kingdoms, and that's something very special in that period. I think it's also important, however, to see that, especially with the example of the Kingdom of Ammon, there's always a certain way to react towards these empires.
For a while at least, it seems Ammon made the right choice.
It was peace and prosperity, like Ammon was blossoming. It was a period of a peaceful and good life, probably.
The same cannot be said for the ancient kingdom of Israel. Crucially, these events of the late Iron Age were close to the time when many scholars think parts of the Old Testament were written. By then, Solomon was a legend, centuries old, but the destruction and turmoil of invading empires was all too real. The contrasting fates of Israel and its neighbors across the Jordan River spurred the writers of the Bible to create an image of Solomon's kingdom, standing mighty and alone in a golden age of its own making.
The biblical texts and scriptures for any religion are trying to tell us a specific version of events, the version of events that are most important to the people when they wrote them down. That's useful information because it gives us a perspective, but it is not the perspective. What we do is weave all of the data together and come to what actually happened.
Evidence found today by archaeologists across the region is shedding light on a lost age, a time of evolving religions, of great industry and trade, and a landscape of competing kingdoms that culminated in grand palaces, decorated with incredible finery. Each new discovery uncovers the reality behind the legend to reveal the truth about the lost world of King Solomon. On the coastline of modern Israel, in the ruins of an ancient city, a team of investigators prepares to head underground.
Okay, I think I'm set.
At the bottom of this shaft could lie clues to the truth.
Oh, wow.
About one of the Bible's biggest villains.
Oh, this is pretty wild.
King Herod.
What's happening down there?
The stories in the Bible are famous across the world. The New Testament tells the life story of Jesus Christ. It's a story spanning the Middle East, containing drama, miracles, and danger. And at its start is one of the most villainous characters of the Bible, King Herod, the ruler of Judea. The Bible tells how shortly after the birth of Jesus, Herod rages at the prophecy of a newborn king of the Jews. Anxious to keep power, he orders his soldiers to kill every child under the age of 2. It is known as the Massacre of the Innocents.
When you have someone like Herod, murder can be part of politics, absolutely.
But while the Bible portrays him as a diabolical villain, history books refer to him as Herod the Great. Today, archaeologists and historians across the region are making fresh discoveries
Oh, wow. Interesting.
and exploring new depths to reveal the truth about King Herod. On the coast of modern Israel lies the ancient port of Caesarea, once a great city in Herod's kingdom of Judea. King Herod built this metropolis in the 1st century BCE. Remarkably, giant structures still survive. Marine geoarchaeologist Beverly Goodman has spent her career exploring them.
Caesarea, to me, it's home. You know, it's a place that becomes such a part of me over my career and over my life, and the amount of time that I've spent thinking about the place. I guess it might be called an obsession.
Today, Beverly and her team are on a mission to discover the true extent of this city in its prime, and what the architecture Herod left behind might reveal about the true character of the infamous king. They start with Herod's palace and one of its grandest features.
This is the pool of Herod's palace. This is part of a palace complex that would have been his residence at the time that he built the whole city.
The palace sits right on the edge of the modern shoreline. More than 2,000 years of time and tide have taken their toll on this 100-foot-long pool, but signs of its original grandeur remain.
It's about 45 thick.
Giant slabs of dressed stone lie beneath the surface.
Okay, 250 in length there?
Yeah.
Okay, can you get a photograph?
And there are bases of huge columns that may have supported upper stories.
We have column, the line here. All the base.
Let's get this cleared out.
The archaeologists make a start on clearing some of the tons of debris filling this pool. But far more work is needed to explore all corners of this site. Even in this state, through the silt and seaweed, Beverly glimpses architectural splendor.
You can picture this pleasure pool with gardens, with all of the luxuries that you would expect from someone that has the status of Herod.
This pool was once covered by exquisite mosaics. It stretched 115 feet long and 60 feet wide. Around it stood fine pillars and containers for exotic plants, and the walls of a magnificent villa that rose 2 stories high. It was the jewel in the crown of Herod's brainchild, Caesarea Maritima, a major city with a theater, a hippodrome, and a busy port.
When I think about how quickly this city was originally built, honestly, it seems outrageous, really, because the entire project was more or less inaugurated in about 2 decades, which might sound like a lot, but it really isn't when you consider the scale of the city.
At Caesarea, Herod embarked on a grand project unlike anything else in Judea. What drove him to build on such a scale? A clue could lie in King Herod's surprising family history. 150 miles south of Caesarea, in modern-day Jordan, lies the ancient city of Petra. 2,000 years ago, at the time of Herod, this was the capital of the Nabateans, neighbors of the Judeans, and a people that controlled trade routes through the desert. Sami al-Hassanat has guided people around Petra's world-famous rock-cut architecture for over 30 years.
Petra is my world, and I'm part of it.
Sami counts himself as related to the Nabateans, something he shares with Herod. Herod wasn't a Judean. His father was a nobleman from Idumea, a people who had converted to Judaism. And on his mother's side, he was descended from Petra's royal family.
His mother was a Nabatean princess. Her name was Cyprus. Neither of his parents were from Judea originally.
Sami wants to explore the city that Herod spent time in as a boy, to uncover the roots of Herod's great ambitions.
This is the very heart of the real Petra and the true Nabatean architecture.
Many of Petra's rock-cut structures are tombs for the city's elite. Early Western explorers labeled this one the Urn Tomb, after the magnificent carvings on its facade. These remarkable structures are a testament to the wealth of Petra's rulers.
We can see that there are holes on both sides. They are opposite to each other. That's to show that there was another level or another story on top of it. And if you see how all the lines of the chiseling, scratching the sandstone walls, they plastered all the interior part and painted it with fresco as permanent colors.
Herod's parents' marriage helped to cement relations between neighboring peoples.
So when a father marries a princess from another tribe or another kingdom, it is for political reasons, for social reasons, to establish connections, healthy and useful connections at the same time with the neighbors.
Herod's father used these connections to earn himself the role of advisor to the Judean royal household. Then, when Herod was just 10 years old, the rise of a new people changed the course of his life. In 63 BCE, Rome conquered Judea and went on to appoint Herod's father as ruler in all but name. Herod helped to run part of Judea, but disaster struck when he turned 30 and a jealous rival poisoned his father. This was a perilous moment for Herod. Like his father, he wasn't popular. His family background made him an outsider to many Judeans, even though he was Jewish by religion.
What legitimizes a leader is the support of his people. Therefore, when you think of a person born in Nabatea, for example, has ethnic origins from this part of the world, then you might not be accepted.
Herod was viewed as merely a puppet of Rome. How did he survive to outdo his father and become not just a Roman official, but King Herod the Great? At his height, King Herod had palaces across Judea, including one on the spectacular hilltop of Masada. Its steep sides make it the perfect stronghold, and its location in southern Judea beside the Dead Sea was especially significant to Herod.
Masada is towards the very corner of Judea, a junction between Idumea and Nabatea. Basically, this was his homeland, that was his place of support, and he felt, I think, more secure in that environment.
Archaeologist Guy Stiebel investigates the life of Herod through the thousands of objects he's excavated at the palace on top of Masada. He wants to explore how an outsider rose to the position of King of Judea.
This coin is well dated to the time of Herod the Great. Coinage was the way to symbolize him being the king of Judea, king of the Jews.
Herod's connection with Masada dates back to a time before he was king, when Masada was home to a small fort. In 40 BCE, an army raised by Judean rebels laid siege to Jerusalem, determined to throw off their Roman overlords and Herod's family. Herod retreated with his followers to the stronghold of Masada, and then he raced on to Rome. Herod threw himself at the mercy of the Senate and was made king with the backing of his friend, Mark Antony. But in 31 BCE, Herod lost his powerful sponsor when Mark Antony was defeated by his rival, the mighty Octavian, who became the first Roman emperor, Caesar Augustus. Herod had been a loyal servant of the Roman state, and in return was made king. Now his fate was in the hands of one man. How would Herod endear himself to Caesar Augustus and keep his throne in Judea? Back in Caesarea, Beverly and her team believe Herod's monuments could hold clues to how he remained an ally of Rome.
Herod is definitely known as a great builder. In fact, much of the archaeological remains that you find from that period, in fact, almost all of them that managed to last, are his doing.
They head into the bowels of Caesarea's most recognizable structure, the Roman theater.
We're under the stage right now. This is sort of the green room.
One of these tunnels is undocumented, and Beverly wants to find out where it goes and what it was for.
This end, we don't actually know where it goes out. What I want to do is document this, go in, photograph, scan the whole thing, get to the end, and see how much further we have till it would actually get to the ocean.
The passage is only 2 feet wide, with barely enough room to turn around.
I mean, I think it does. I think it connects. So this part of the channel that we were able to get into is about 40 feet. So we can see at the end that there's a continuation to the next part of it through here. Okay, this is gonna be tight. Let's see here. Real light.
The tunnel gets even narrower.
It's getting a little claustrophobic. You all right?
As they approach the end.
Oh, wow, that is actually real light.
What do you say?
There's a channel here that goes up. I mean, it's open to the surface.
So it would be draining something from the surface?
Yeah.
It's clear the tunnel wasn't for people, but for water. Part of a system that drained it from the Roman street above into underground channels like this one.
The tunnel was most likely for drainage and plumbing, so this looks a lot like other areas of water infrastructure, whether it's the aqueduct channels or other channels throughout Caesarea. And this is super useful information for us that we can use to continue forward.
Herod's Caesarea was Roman in its scale and in its public buildings, like the theater and hippodrome. But Beverly's work reveals that Herod's new build project was not just mimicking the Roman look. He had built a place to be lived in, a working Roman city, right down to its plumbing and sewers.
Herod sort of had this prefab Roman city idea, so he made sure that the city had all of the standard features of a Roman city.
Beverly believes Herod's drive to expand Judean infrastructure on a Roman model was part of a master plan targeted at the Roman emperor, Caesar Augustus.
Herod named Caesarea after Caesar Augustus. He wanted to create a tribute to him. So the city that has a theater and has a hippodrome and has a palace and has a harbor, you know, all of these fingerprints of Rome in honor of Caesar Augustus.
Rome had put Herod in power. Without Caesar Augustus's support, he could lose his throne. Writers at the time said that Herod's pandering to Rome was so great that he even defiled the temple in Jerusalem. In his capital city, Herod expanded the mount around the temple with thousands of giant limestone blocks. He covered the innermost shrine with gold, carried out by trained priests instead of craftsmen, to preserve the shrine's sanctity. But later accounts say he also broke sacred Jewish law by placing a Roman imperial eagle over a temple gateway. Enraged, Jewish citizens cut down the eagle, and Herod had them burnt alive in his Jericho amphitheater. The story shows Herod stamping out threats to his power, just as violently as the Bible's infamous massacre of the innocents. And although he was meant to be an observant Jew, Beverly thinks his motives for renovating the temple weren't wholly pure.
Herod is building a Roman temple for Caesar Augustus at the same time that he's building a temple for the Jews. So having the two different temples was also a way that Herod could be king in both of those realms.
Herod was a sharp political operator who also built great things for his people. So why did his name become a byword for the ultimate villain? The hilltop palace of Masada is a great source of Herodian finds. At Guy's laboratory, he scours the stores for clues that could reveal what Herod did with all the power of a king, now that he had Judea under his control.
One of the nice things about Masada is that you don't need to imagine. You see the artifacts. And one of the finest examples of the contribution of King Herod the Great is actually his introduction of new materials, new technologies. You can see here stone tiles that we call them in Latin opus sectile, a technique of flooring that is typical to that period of time, the time of Augustus, but you find it in Judea only in the palaces of Herod.
This luxury tiling was not something reserved for a small inner sanctum. It covered the floor of a large bathhouse. Herod even made sure this expensive tiling was of a unique design.
What is really interesting is that this triangle is typical only to Herod. So there's like a marker that may identify it with Herod.
Herod imported Roman engineering as well as Roman style.
If I turn it over, you can actually see the binding material, and this is actually cement, what we call opus caementicum. This is the first time we have in Judea this Italian or Roman innovation, and it was brought from Naples and allowed people to do nearly everything.
The Romans were master builders. This was the start of an age of emperors that would see incredible luxury and architecture in grand imperial villas across Italy. Herod created a palace to rival any of them, bringing the latest building innovations to the harshest of environments.
It's amazing. Herod was so up to date with the new technologies, and he was the first ambassador to bring this tradition over. We have a spa in the middle of the desert, and again, we're in the Judean desert. It's scorching hot, and still you have 3 bathhouses.
Masada was once witness to a desperately dangerous time in Herod's rise to power. Now it was a symbol of comfort and opulence, advertising a total command of his realm.
He created something new, created an island, a paradise. And I think this is another fine demonstration of the ability of Herod of harnessing and using architecture to make a political statement. I am the king.
Herod was lord of all he surveyed. His palaces were as fine as any king's. How much more ambitious would his buildings get? In Caesarea, Beverly prepares to head underground on her mission to chart more of Herod's grandest creation. There is an opening to a well buried here in the undergrowth.
This would have been in the original city. So 2,000 years ago, this area was built up with all of the Roman features, with the hippodrome, with the temple, with the harbor.
Beverly plans to climb down more than 30 feet into the past to the very roots of Caesarea. She's looking for evidence in the structure and the undisturbed soil at the bottom that might date this well to Herod's reign.
There's always this excitement, this anticipation, this hope. Also, we don't really know the period of time it's going to get us to, but we should be seeing the entire 2,000 years of history of Caesarea in this well. Okay, I think I'm set.
We'll bring you the oxygen sensor, and you check the oxygen level.
There are multiple dangers in Beverly's way. She will need to measure air quality as she descends to ensure there is enough oxygen for her to breathe.
The well, it's a bit deep, okay? If the rope is not reaching to the ground, talk to me.
And she also doesn't know how safe the ground is at the bottom.
Again?
In Caesarea, Beverly nears the bottom of the shaft in her search for more of Herod the Great's city.
It's cooler down here.
Yeah.
The air that has settled in the well could contain dangerous levels of gases such as methane.
What's happening down there?
Wait a second.
Everything's good? What is the oxygen level?
Oxygen's fine.
Cool.
Inch by inch, Beverly finally makes it down with rope to spare. She begins testing the depth of the deposits at her feet.
So here I think we're hitting wood. See, it's kind of a dull sound. When we hit stone, it should ping a little up. That might be stone. So we're at some kind of bottom. So we're gonna go ahead and take a sample from there. Trying to take a core of the sediment that has built up inside the well. This will be in part to kind of get some dates on it.
Then, checking the walls of the well itself, she spots something.
Oh, wow. Oh, this is pretty wild. So we do have this gap.
In ancient masonry that has dozens of tons of stone pressing down on it from above, there is a horizontal gap going all the way around the well.
Question is whether this is a building gap, which is kind of doubtful, or it could be if we've got an earthquake that caused this to shift down like that. Here we've got some pretty amazing layers that I'm guessing this probably represents a slightly earlier phase of building.
It's as though the entire bottom section of the well structure has dropped 3 inches.
Nice job.
Oh, that was fun. Wow. Well, that was amazing. That was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
The team bags up the samples and will analyze them to date the loose soil filling the well. For Beverly, the biggest finding is the structural damage at the bottom of the well.
It's a little bit curious because you can see the changes in the building types. So the top is the most recent, and then you've got another sequence where the shape of the stones changes a bit, and then the stones get much bigger, which is sort of a calling card of some of the earliest phases.
The layers of grander, larger stone blocks correspond to Herod's city building. Beverly is looking for the beginnings of Herod's Caesarea, but she has stumbled across signs of a strange event that happened after the city's construction.
Archaeologically speaking, we have a lot of work, that we're gonna have a lot of layers and a lot of history to be able to investigate as we excavate in that same area.
The bizarre gaps in the Herodian layers suggest a huge natural disaster, What did this mean for Herod's grand mega project? The drop at the bottom of the well reminds Beverly of another puzzling feature at Caesarea, its steep beach.
This area is right between the Hippodrome and the harbor. And there's this entire complex that was used for warehouses. It became stores. But one of the theories is that this is actually the area of the original ship sheds.
Ancient ships were hauled out of the sea when not in use and dragged up long, shallow beaches into ship sheds. The sheds protected the vessels from wood-eating pests in the water.
But how in the world did they get the boats from there all the way up to here if we have a cliff here today? You can see really clearly how short this beach is and how much further down the sea level is. So this is a very difficult distance to take ships up.
Lifting 30-feet-long boats so abruptly out of the water and over the step in the beach would have been almost impossible for their crews. To understand what might be going on,
Notebook secured.
Beverly heads into the water.
One of the main goals of my research is surveying and tracking different points along the coast and finding evidence for where the coastline was in the past.
Beverly and her colleague Jeremy descend into the choppy waves. The pair struggle with the low visibility as they head out from the coast. But they quickly begin finding what look like man-made blocks along the seafloor. "300 feet off the shore of Caesarea, Beverly and Jeremy are finding signs of submerged ancient buildings. Then, instantly recognizable as they loom out of the murky water, stone columns. Beverly and her colleague take photographs and log the dimensions before heading back to the surface. The columns are solid evidence that this area, well away from the current shoreline, was once dry land.
We were able to see the extension of some of these features at least 75 meters, 100 meters off of the shore today.
Their findings underwater leave no doubt in Beverly's mind.
There's no way that area could have been underwater. There's nothing there that's part of the harbor.
She believes such a huge change to the city's coastline hints at an enormously destructive force.
It could be something caused by a rapid event like a tsunami, or it could be something that's a slow process, but most likely it's a combination of all of these things. One of the things that we've learned over the past 2 decades is the extent and the magnitude that a tsunami can change a coastline.
A tsunami could have been powerful enough to create drops in the coastline and break underground structures like the well. Beverly's discoveries support a radical new take, depicting a Caesarea that was very different in Herod's day.
If what we're seeing is true, and the coastline of Caesarea is this much bigger, it means that there's a lot of areas that are now lost or only partially preserved. But more importantly, it means that the city itself looked very different, that there were huge areas that were between, say, the Hippodrome and the water, and next to the harbor and near the palace, and entire areas of Caesarea that have been lost to the waves.
Beverly's work has revealed that in Herod's age, the city was much larger than today. Next to the Hippodrome, the land stretched 300 feet further out to sea, creating easy access to the ship sheds and space for more buildings. Overall, Caesarea may have been twice as big as previously thought, and the port's 3 huge basins, stretching for 1.5 million square feet, may have been built within the ancient shoreline, making it one of the biggest ports in the Roman Empire. Beverly returns to the ship sheds and finds her new data completely changes how she sees Herod's city.
If we have more coastline, then we actually can have the right distance and the right slope to make it more realistic that these were used as ship sheds.
This place that has helped Beverly to understand the true extent of Caesarea was where she began her career over 20 years ago.
This place is where I would say I was born as an archaeologist. This is actually the place where I worked on as a student, as a volunteer in my first excavation ever. At the time, I didn't realize what the significance was.
For nearly 2,000 years, Herod's greatest architectural legacy lay half hidden by the waves. With this new information, the scale and ambition of Herod's incredible mega-project becomes all the more impressive, creating a huge deep-water port where no natural bay existed. Herod had his engineers dig a huge hole down to the bedrock, large enough to hold a few hundred jumbo jets. They built a huge ring of wood and concrete to support a solid pier and breakwater before they finally let in the sea. Herod likely built a military dock where Roman battleships laid ready to police his port. And he erected a grand temple dedicated to Augustus and Rome to prove his loyalty to the empire and cement his power in the region. When Herod completed the port in 15 BCE, he had control of all trade in and out of Judea. The taxes that it generated earned him staggering wealth. What could bring him down? The arid hilltop palace at Masada has preserved a treasure trove of objects belonging to Herod the Great. Guy believes some of these items could shed light on the level of decadence and opulence reached by Herod's luxury living. This particular amphora held more than just wine.
Here, you can see here the inscription of an M, which stands for Mala, Mala Cumana, which are apples from Cumae in South Italy, north of Naples. And you can see here the beta, the B, stands for Basileos. In Greek, it's king. So this is a shipment of several dozens of apples from Cumae.
Picked only at midnight on a full moon, then shipped for 1,500 miles, these were considered the finest apples money could buy.
The apples were conserved in wine with honey and spices, and my lips becoming wet just describing how marvelous it was.
Expensive imported delicacies like this would have graced the table of even the most esteemed guests at Herod's hilltop oasis.
So just imagine we can actually demonstrate that the table of King Herod the Great contained the best dessert in the Roman world. It was imported from Italy all the way to Masada. And that's one example of how prestigious life were and why it was good to be the king, as Mel Brooks once said.
While Herod was importing Roman architecture, culture, and cuisine, he made sure plenty of his great wealth flowed in the other direction. He never forgot who was in charge.
From a Roman point of view, he developed the eastern corner of the Mediterranean, building the harbor, controlling the highways that brought all the goods from the east and from the south, so economy flourished. He was paying taxes, but he was also using his money to host Augustus, to build a temple at Caesarea, to honor Augustus and elsewhere throughout Judea.
Herod had his kingdom under control. But the calculation and ruthlessness that got him to power descended into paranoia and horror in his old age. In the Bible's stories, Herod orders the murder of his subjects' children. In reality, he killed his own. Convinced his own sons were plotting against him, the elderly Herod charged them with treason and sentenced them to death. He ordered high-ranking Judeans to be killed following his death, to make it look like his people were mourning for him.
Herod would not be chosen to be the father of the year. Augustus was quoted dozens of years thereafter, translated into English. One would be better off being the pig of Herod rather than being one of his sons.
When Herod did die, a military procession marched his body from Jericho to Jerusalem, but the national mourning was muted. With Herod gone, the true authority in Judea was revealed. Augustus stepped in to split up Herod's kingdom, and eventually Rome assumed direct control of it all. If the real power always lay with Rome, why is Herod painted as the ultimate villain in the Bible? At Caesarea, Beverly heads inland to explore the parts of the city that survived a devastating tsunami. She's at the Temple of Augustus to search for evidence of what became of Herod's city and his legacy after the Bible's greatest villain was gone.
One of the most significant buildings that Herod built was the temple. According to the descriptions of this temple, it was entirely grandiose. It had massive columns. So we know that, in fact, there was a very, very large and impressive temple that stood here.
Now the site is merely ruins, but Beverly believes there is still a lot to learn from what remains.
One of the ways that the different phases of building can tell us about what happened in the past is not only the buildings themselves and the shape and the stones, but also even the material that was used to stick them together. We can actually see the heavy amounts of shell. And research has shown that these specific species, we actually know that they're from offshore and they're brought to the coastline during tsunamis.
Materials carried by tsunamis, like the seashells, are mixed in with this cement. It means the wall was built after the tsunami and long after Herod. This isn't Herod's temple, but a much later structure.
Within the cement, we have a story of the history of this coastline.
With games at the Hippodrome and public bathhouses and theater, Herod had created an ideal of Roman life, but it wasn't to last. On the 13th of December, 115 CE, a catastrophic tsunami devastated the city. Further inland, it seems Herod's architectural legacy suffered a different attack. This large structure covers the original temple, completely overwriting Herod's grand homage to Caesar Augustus.
This large wall is actually part of the foundations of a church that was built on top of the foundations of the Roman temple.
In the centuries after the supposed massacre of the innocents, when the Bible claims Herod tried to kill the infant Jesus, Christianity grew and became established. In 313 CE, Rome's first Christian emperor made the religion legal and revolutionized the empire.
Once this place is established with the temple, it basically becomes the holy place of Caesarea. So after Rome becomes Christian, the temple is dismantled and a church is built.
This was a land Herod the Great once ruled with an iron fist. and the gospel writers drew on the memory of his violent reign to create drama in their storytelling.
If you see the way Christianity looked at Herod as the murderer of the innocent, it was a natural linkage, him being not always very popular, to say the least, not inside and not outside.
Herod had been one of Rome's most loyal and effective servants. But for the empire's 50 million citizens, the Christian gospel turned him into a two-dimensional character, a necessary villain in Christ's origin story.
At the end of the day, I think it's more to do with the newly born religion, Christianity, creating a mythology, choosing, if you like, the ultimate villain, which is Herod, putting that together, hence the tradition we're familiar with.
Now, across the region, new archaeological discoveries reveal the truth behind the title of Herod the Great.
We love great heroes and we love great villains. His ability, his pragmatism, and the fact that he was a juggler. The fact that he managed to overcome all those obstacles inside and outside. Someone referred to him in ancient times as a fox and a lion in one person, and you may decide which is which.
He defeated local opposition and juggled his nation's interests at the edges of a conquering superpower. He built vast temples and incredible palaces and transformed the cultural landscape by championing Roman arts and games. He established a huge port to increase trade, and his kingdom flourished under his control. But he also ruled with ruthless violence, immortalized in the stories of the Bible. The legends of Herod's cruelty have outlasted even his grandest monuments, obscuring his legacy and leaving one of the most complex and successful rulers of his time to be remembered as the villain in someone else's story.